Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole here on Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-hostess, Victoria Monday, and down in the chat room, Alina, moderating the chat. We have a fantastic show up for you this week. I should say this month, because Edge of the Rabbit Hole is once a month on Connecting the Universe. And that is our very good friend, James Keenan, author, researcher. You probably recognize him from shows like Mystery at Blind Frog Ranch, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and he's a fantastic speaker and presenter as well. We just picking his brain. We're going to be here a little while to talk to him. And those that are part of the Connected Universe portal, the time travelers with us, will get a few minutes of his time in the after show as well. So I do want to say, those that are listening to the podcast version of this later on, please join us live every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern time, connecteduniverseportal.com. Lots of great material out there. In addition to Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Connecting the Universe, you get the behind the scenes, the sneak peek stuff. You get the monthly Q&A videos, the Mike's Morning Mug, boatload of articles, all kinds of wonderful material out there. It's connecteduniverseportal.com. All right. Well, without further ado, James, let's go ahead and get into this. Known you for quite a while now. It's been a few years. Met you at the UFO mega conference there in Laughlin some years ago, and just became fast friends, which was really great. You, me, Katie Page, Trey Hudson. It was a nice group that we had there in our circle, and to see you, now showing up on some of these amazing shows, Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch. My hat's off to you. I'm really happy for you, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah, it's I think been 5 or 6 years since we met in Laughlin.
It's been a little while now.
It was a really good conference. Yeah,
it was. We had a good time. So I guess we'll just dive right into your time there, because you got in season 3. So they added you and Ryan Skinner. There you guys are with Chad Ollinger. And some of the things that you guys are doing are really, really fascinating. And maybe you can kind of explain to our listeners a little bit more about what it is that you guys are doing there. Because it's like, to me, part treasure quest, but also part, discovering ancient history and lost history of the Americas and that part of our continent.
Right. So I think Discovery, the main concept of it was a treasure hunting show mixed in with a lot of the high strangeness that occurs in the Uintah Basin and the Uinta Mountains. And when those two come together, you also have, like you were talking about, this ancient civilizations and history that go along in this area. And personally, the three of us have discussed many times, my passion is really this hunt for these lost cultures and civilizations, specifically those of beings or people of great stature. You'll call them giants, who I believe were at the beginning of history in the first world. If Native American cultures talk about that, we're now currently in the 4th or 5th world, and that first world was populated by giants that were killed by very large jaguars. If go imagine that.
Yeah, wow.
And then the last world was a great deluge. By water was the destruction. And it always appears that we have these same topics coming up where in order to survive these cataclysmic events, they had to go underground and survive for a long period of time before mankind could come back up and start over. We're being pushed into these dark ages over and over again. And obviously we've lost history, not just from cataclysmic events, but from other cultures and civilizations maybe trying to cover up what occurred in the past for the wrong reasons. An example, when the Aztec finally became the Aztec, they wanted to be considered like the original people of mankind that came directly from the gods. So they destroyed a lot of their own codices and other history books. 100 years before the Spaniards, the Europeans came and did an even better job.
Well, unfortunately, they decimated a lot. Yeah, it's really fascinating. The fact that we have kind of this cyclic nature of civilization rising and falling, and like you were saying, the method of destruction has been kind of various, whether it's ourselves or a deluge and what have you. And I think we also tend to forget because there seems to be like this great debate between like the traditional side and those within our community, where it seems like the more traditional view as everything was very very linear and moving on upward to this point. And it seems strange that they can't get their head around that civilization can rise up and different things can happen, whether it's some sort of cataclysm. I mean, there could be a war and some sort of genocide, and a lot of times back in those days they were rather barbaric. When you
Right.
took over you wiped everything out, you destroyed their culture. So it seems bizarre to me that that really doesn't get recognized in that traditional mainstream history, and we're left to try to I don't know, I guess for us we're trying to solve those mysteries, which is exciting, but it would be, I don't know, I guess maybe a little bit more helpful to have that backing from the more traditional side. What do you think?
Sure. Another thing to take into consideration is that what is left, what does remain, specific artifacts, books, codices, history, it ends up in private collections.
Yeah.
And we'll never know. We don't know about it, or we don't have access to it. And, unfortunately, it's lost to us. And,
Yeah, I saw some of that same
so
stuff in Egypt. When I was there first time around a few years ago, opened up a new crypt under Dendara, and you're going through, and it's not, they didn't hold bodies down there. It's just like this long hall under the temple, but there's these large blocks that have been taken out of the walls, and you're looking, and you see these fresh chisel marks. And apparently this passageway had been closed for like 20 years. And you're looking at it, like, what's going on here? You pull one of the guys off to the side and discover, yeah, those were like quote unquote power pieces that got they got wow, I'm getting tongue tied.
yeah, reappropriated.
Reappropriate, sold
Yeah.
off to the highest bidder into private collections. My tongue kept wanting to say sold off, and I'm like, that sold is not a word. Sold. Thank you. All right.
You have that
James,
same
back to
thing.
you.
You have that same thing at Tiwanaku in South America. It wasn't that a lot of it was destroyed. A lot of it was reappropriated and turned into the towns and cities around it.
There's that too. Yeah.
That gets left out of a lot, but what's talked about on the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, that we reuse history. It's just the easiest way, quickest way to build your farm, build your house, build the government building.
Yeah,
And
it's already right there. It's already been quarried.
right.
So I get that.
Yeah.
So why not use it?
So I got to ask you, James, have this screen cap of you. I mean, you guys went into some really,
Yeah.
that's a tight squeeze. You guys went in some really fascinating places, these caves that you were essentially squeezing through like that. It seems like you guys had quite an adventure out there at Blind Frog.
Yeah. So I want everybody to know that was not some set in Hollywood or LA. There's a lot of people like, first off, I don't know everything that happened in season 1 and 2. I came in on season 3, and I can tell you, we never went to a set to film that. That was underground. It was extremely difficult to navigate through these passageways. Cavern systems are everywhere. If you ask anybody that lives in Vernal or Roosevelt, which is around Skinwalker Ranch, there's cavern systems everywhere.
Yeah.
In the Uinta Mountains, all over the place. And I mean, some of them are known to go for miles and miles. And obviously, there was a greater connection in the past. Over time, earthquakes occur.
Sure.
There's that part of the Uinta Mountains has this earthquake on this major fault probably about every 35 to 45 years. You can almost go back, and it's about a 4.5 to a 5.5 on the Richter. So that does damage. massive amounts of water are running underground. Last year, we all were hit by just a large amount of snowfall everywhere. Record snowfall in Utah. Where did all that runoff, all that snowmelt go? It went into the sinks underground into the system, and it obviously destroys a lot of what was there, especially when it probably hadn't had that amount traveling through it in at least 100 plus years.
Yeah,
things get destroyed.
So, with how much, how many miles of cave system that's out there, and the goal is to try to find this lost Aztec treasure, how much more difficult does that make your job?
Yeah, it makes it a lot more difficult. Just a couple things, and I wish this gets discussed. And you and I know very well. In a 1 hour episode, 41 minutes of that is the show, and you film for months and months. And there's 8 episodes, and you get maybe about 5 hours total.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, you don't see everything, and not all the historical data or information ends up being put out there. And it can get frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for some people that watch. But there's just bits and pieces that I wish made it to the show that would help explain things to people. Like, I felt kind of weird. I talked about Towat, this hillside that looked like a Native American, and the history as to why it's called Towat never was told. So people are like,
they're kind of scratching their heads.
Who the hell's Towat? But what people have to understand, and this is a great example of lost or misunderstood histories. The Mormons came, they spoke not to the Ute Indians. The Ute tribe were actually Great Basin, Colorado. They didn't come until the 1860s when they were forced onto the reservation. It was the Utah Territory Indians, which were the Shoshone, the Paiute. When we're talking Shoshone with Chief Wakara, that was specifically Snake Band, which are the Timpanogos. 300 of them live on the Ute reservation. They were forced on there with the Ute and just became known as the Ute, even though they have nothing other than being Uto-Aztecan. Back in history, at some point, their ancestor or origin was the same. But Towat is what the Mormons heard and understood from the Shoshone, where in Uto-Aztecan, the god is actually Teut or Teut, which sounds like Towat. And it it was a misunderstanding. And how Chief Wakara saw that was an out-of-body experience, where he apparently was traveling over and he saw that feature that looked like a Native American, where they knew origin or Tamhuancan was located, which I believe is not just where the Aztec have come back and hidden part of their treasure, but where origin was after the deluge, and where there's other artifacts, historical records, and burials for all the major chiefs, all the way back to their deities, who were these people of great stature, or the giants, which are recognized in the petroglyphs and pictographs all over the area.
Yeah, a lot more of that information would have been great, rather than like the last episode, like half of it was Dwayne stuck in the mud, which I get, is trying to make for exciting television, but that kind of dragged out a little while. That and all that's fascinating. I know Victoria's itching to ask some questions, so go ahead, Victoria.
Why did he drive in the mud? No, I have several questions. That's not one of them. How much hiking do y'all do all the time? Oh my gosh! I mean, it's every episode. Y'all are like going for miles and miles, and
and
y'all drive.
So remember, it's 160 acres, which sounds really small, but it is pure wilderness, and it is exactly. It's so uneven. It's so difficult to traverse. It looks like the cabin is right there, and then you just 5 seconds later, you're on the other side. No, you got to go down. You got to cross the creek. You got to go back up around the hillside to get to the energy zone.
I used to hike to Superstitions all the time. So, I mean, I know.
It was a lot of hiking. There, just miles and miles of hiking. And obviously, this is the first time that we expanded the search, because I believe that there's multiple entrances. And that a very important part of the entire story to where this gold or treasure is located is also north of the ranch.
Yeah, that was exciting when y'all went up in the cave and you said, "Oh, it's over there." There we go. Got to go over there.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I'm kind of hazy on history. Oh, that would be a great name of book. Anyway, were the Aztecs in Utah and then they went down to Mexico and they said, "Let's go hide our gold and go back to Utah"?
Yes. So origin, I believe that origin was in the Uinta Mountains for many, not just the indigenous people of the Americas, but maybe even farther from there, maybe in South Pacific, some of that as well. When they split off, the Aztec went to the Great Salt Lake and an island on there, and that was Aztlan. And then obviously when there was less precipitation available, they started migrating southward.
Okay.
And over hundreds of years, multiple generations, they finally made it to Tenochtitlan, Lake Texcoco, which is now Mexico City. But when they kicked Cortez out of Tenochtitlan on June 30th of 1520, Montezuma had already died. So it's not really Montezuma's treasure. It's his brother, Cuitlavaca, who took everything. He sent his warriors and their slaves and deposited the treasure that was still hidden, and approximately 3,500 pounds of treasure that was dredged out of Texcoco that was dropped by the Spaniards as they retreated. And it was taken to multiple sites. I think 4 or 5 of those sites were to throw the people off that were watching them, because obviously if you have 100 warriors, they're not going to go unnoticed. And then that the main treasure was deposited in origin, which I believe is known as Tamhuancan or Tamhuanchan, which is in the Uinta Mountains.
Okay.
And
So I'm sorry. My second part of that question was the big snake. When they did the DNA testing, there was a prehistoric snake DNA that was found in the water of the caves. Doesn't the Aztec have a god that's basically like a big snake?
well, it's through. I think all cultures have that, but Quetzalcoatl is
That's
the feathered serpent. But
Okay.
what's even more interesting, and then we get into this high strangeness, is very close on the Uinta Basin is on the reservation is Bottle Hollow Reservoir. And I talk about it in all my presentations, that there have been multiple drownings that appear to be related to a very large serpent. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs won't discuss anything about it. So you always got to think about it. If we had these blind frogs when we opened up an ecosystem underground, why couldn't something else be there as well? I mean, it's a perfect pathway back and forth. And, the Uinta Basin is very well known for its prehistoric animals. Why couldn't something have survived underground? And people go, oh, well, it's a serpent. It requires to be heating and all that. But think about underground. There's a ton of
thermal venting.
Thermal venting. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that was where I was going.
Now, a couple of years ago when we were chatting, you had just discovered a cave that had ice in it, an ice cave.
Right.
Is that the same? Okay, basically the season that just aired, was that shot this past year or was that shot way back then? I guess is my real question.
No, that was, we were filming all the way up until October.
Oh, okay.
So that was this year. Yeah.
Because when all
That's
that
a lot
water
of filming for just 8 episodes. I wish I'd give you more airtime. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, as James's summer intern this year, Mike, I will be getting you the behind the scenes scoop. I'm not going in the cave though, because I'm claustrophobic, but I'll do the remote vehicle to go in, and you can look that way.
No, I love being underground. I go to Mexico to be underground in the cenotes, and a lot of people don't know that most of those locations in Mexico, like Teotihuacan and the Cholula Pyramid, which is the largest pyramid in the world by volume, it was placed on top of these cavern systems.
Yeah.
So what's more important is what's underground, and it just created a society around it They built up the cities, but it wasn't the cities that were the original. Because when you look at the jungle, it's just flat jungle. Why put a location where they put it? Because something's underground.
Yeah. Well, you have, so many of those cave systems, they're tunnels that they built and all that, but also over time, our history gets buried. You've probably seen, recently here, down in the Amazon, they are discovering massive cities there. And, all that was hidden underground, but, LiDAR basically helped them to find that. And we need to go underground to find a lot of this lost history. Yeah.
Yeah. My last book, The Giant in the Golden Underworld, it all deals with this underground history. And when you look at who the deities were, who people were worshiping, it were these beings of great stature in every culture. And I honestly believe that it started back with what we call or consider the Nephilim. And it just moves out. And I think they were at one point all the same culture.
Yeah, I need to, 'cause I'm supposed to be presenting this year at the Nephilim Anthropology Conference in Scotland. I need to hook you up with them because I think you'd be a great presenter for them talking about this subject. I do want to get into more on the giants and Nephilim here in a moment, but we have a question out of the chat room. Good friend Kat Gash here says, has there been any documentation or newspaper reports of meteors hitting that area to account for the ore that is there?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I went out and I looked at the area, and there were 4 meteor strikes, not there, but around anywhere between 100 miles in towards about 20 miles. And they're really good specimens. The iridium was as high as 52 parts per million in one of the meteorite strikes. So independent of the Discovery Channel show years ago, I showed my lab results of what I took at one location that I had examined on Blind Frog Ranch, and it was 66 parts per million.
Wow.
So more so than any other meteor specimen that's been found in Utah.
Now,
So
since you mentioned iridium,
ahead.
with the poachers and the people that keep going on and digging on Dwayne's land, couldn't you sell some of the iridium, because isn't it worth like billions of dollars, and get some sort of security or some sort of drones to fly over and patrol, I guess?
Yeah. So it was real what was going on with the trespassers and the legal battle that Dwayne was involved in. And I don't know how much I can go into that, but so that was a legitimate part of it. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure how that has evolved, or if it's still in court or ended up back in court. So the mineral rights versus ownership of the property is in question. But here's what a lot of people don't realize is even if you own the mineral rights, you tried to purchase that out from under ownership, you still require the owner of the property to give you the right to come and mine or dig. So these people just thought, oh, okay, you know what? I have the mineral rights. I'm going to go ahead and do what I want. And that's where this huge issue is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes no sense to me. So like my parents, the house that they had, Victoria, just north of Worcester, Ohio, when they built that property, they were the original homeowners, and they had the mineral rights to the land for some of the oil that's there. Now they still retain those rights long after they sold off the house, but they can't today go onto that property of their old house and drop their own oil rig on there. So that's why I don't understand what in the world's going on here with Blind Frog Ranch. How these people are just popping up saying, "I can dig here." It's not your property, though.
Yeah, and
well, you're next to the Bureau of Land Management. You're right next there. You just pop on over.
Well, and then unfortunately, it became so convoluted that the sheriff's department wasn't sure if it was a civil matter or a criminal matter, and they should have still arrested those guys for trespassing.
Right.
I mean, but again, it was tied up in court, and there's a lot of civil versus criminal issues involved. And I was a police officer, so I'm not gonna, say they made the wrong choice. at the right time. At that time, it could have probably been considered the best choice maybe to make in that sense. I don't necessarily have to agree with that, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
But if it's only 160 acres, can't they get some sort of aerial patrol? I mean, that's not that big to
It is
get a high school boy with a drone. You know?
It is so rugged, Victoria. Now, so a lot of people go, oh, well, I own property right next to it and I don't have these issues. Yeah, you own property right off of the main road, not having to
it's like
cross.
flyover.
Yeah, but it's the whole reason why I think that Blind Frog Ranch is so important is because I believe it was the collection site, the cache site for everything coming in from the Spaniards. And it was very easy to defend in this location. There's battlement areas on all sides, but it's extremely difficult in our current day and age to effectively, permanently, all the time, have security the way that you see it maybe at other locations. It's just extremely difficult because it's surrounded by BLM, Utah state property, which everybody has the right to be on. You know, and some boundaries are currently in question, and that was what part of the court procedures were about.
That's tough.
Let me ask you, speaking of the land, you guys did some climbing up into some really interesting locations. Did you ever figure out who built the cairn?
No. I don't think it's more than a few hundred years old. There's other ones in the area that.
Oh, are there?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people will say, well, it was part of the Uinta Trail. And I'll argue with them all day because I've talked to BLM, I've talked to local rangers, and in some of the older journals, they were already there. And I've been on most of the Uinta mountain areas, and I've seen those cairns that are there. And why the hell would you put 3 cairns within 85 feet of each other in a triangular position on top of a mound that shouldn't exist up in the Uinta Mountains as a trail? What trail are you trying to follow where I can see the other 2 from when I'm standing near one? But then for triangulation purposes, one of them has a hole in the middle that you can see all the way right directly to Blind Frog Ranch, even though it's several miles away. It's really interesting. You know, but
so
everybody
some
has
others type of marker. Yeah,
and everybody has an opinion, which is just fine with me, you know. And we were starting it off, you know, a lot of the history is lost, unfortunately, or it was oral tradition with the indigenous people. So, you know, written historical records other than on rock doesn't exist. And also another huge thing that we got to remember too, is most of history in the past is just like what we do today. What do we use? What's our common structures? What is our paper made out of? It's all wood. And wood's not going to stand up like stone. So 95% of what was here in the historical record is no longer. It's gone. It's back to the earth.
Right. Yeah. That makes it a lot more difficult, of course. Yeah. And the oral tradition, even though they've passed that down for so many generations, that seems to be getting lost now with the it seems to me with the younger generations kind of having that disconnect these days to the older ones.
Yeah. It's happening with, it seems like all the indigenous tribes. There's just no more connectivity to the past, to the ancestors.
Right.
Okay, I have a question about the stone carvings and drawings and stuff in general. This is just my not knowing, my unknowledge, I guess you could say. Why are they all so high up on the cliffs of the face of the cliffs? Did they build scaffolding or something and put them up so people wouldn't damage them? Or has the land eroded? Or were they just very tall people, like giants?
Yeah, I think you're right with the scaffolding. I think a lot of, like at McConkey Ranch, just outside of Vernal, Utah, I think the Three Kings petroglyph, which is extremely important for a lot of reasons, and I can't get into it completely, but that was scaffolding because there's no other way to get to it.
Yeah, because it's so high up.
Yeah. Other locations, maybe in Arizona, the water levels for the rivers and all that were much higher in the past too.
Okay.
That, you have to consider that until about 1450 when there was a major drought. 1450 common era, excuse me.
Yeah. Okay. Because I've always seen them. They've like been so high up.
Yeah. And remember
It's
our
like,
reservoir, we built these reservoirs and a lot of that history is now underwater, unfortunately.
Oh.
It's true too, yeah.
3 years ago, when the water levels dropped at a lot of places, people started finding, petroglyphs and pictographs that hadn't been seen in 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah. Towns were coming back,
Coming back. Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting.
So let me get back to, because we had Kat's question there about the meteor. So one of the things that I've always believed, and I have not done anywhere near as much research as you out there, but okay, the idea that there was a meteor impact in that area. So you have, okay, we mentioned iridium earlier, but other metals are mixed in with that as well. Would that be a primary cause for a lot of the high strangeness out there? It's kind of basic, as the magnetism rises up out of the Earth's core and interacts with this, possibly large piece of different metals, right? From whatever meteor strike may have happened there. Is that what's causing a lot of these different strange phenomena to occur in the area of Uintah Basin?
I think that's a great possibility. I think that it's possible that at a lot of sites around the world where we have this high strangeness, what people, it's probably more on the normal to be considered paranormal. I don't always like to use that word, but the high strangeness, I think.
Well, when we say paranormal, people immediately go to ghosts and hauntings these days.
Right. And there's so much phenomena. It's not just that one single phenomenon.
Right.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's an energy and it's doing one of two things. It's either creating the phenomena or it's attracting the phenomena. And that's why we have areas like Mount Wilson in Nevada, Skinwalker Ranch right down the street from Blind Frog Ranch, where Katie's at in Colorado. I think we need to see what's underground. I think that's the most important thing. And then the other piece of that puzzle is running water. You have transfer of material, minerals, positive ionic charged minerals, which could really create a lot of this transient energy that's being seen all over the place. And I know Victoria's going to ask me about the ley lines.
I was just going to say, just call it the woo-woo, and that just takes care of everything.
Yeah, woo-woo.
The woo-woo out there. Yeah, it encompasses. It's more than paranormal. Yeah. What about the ley lines? I was actually going to go lava tube. I'm all about lava tubes these days.
Yeah.
And basalt.
Yeah. You know that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what another issue with the thought process is people think, right below our feet, 10, 20, 30 feet. We're drilling 100, 120 feet. No, you have to think big. You have to think 800 feet plus deeper. That's when we're going to start hitting the history. That's when we're going to start finding origin for where we came from. These old deities that were much larger than Homo sapien. And, once we enter that glacial period and then go past that glacial period of about 12,000 years ago, who knows who was here? If the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, how many cultures and societies and civilizations have existed here and just been wiped out or gone?
Yeah.
Or according to the Navajo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's great that you mentioned that, James, because that's something I've been talking about a lot here lately with my own work, is that, 4.5 billion years is a long time. You think about, dinosaurs went extinct approximately 64 million years ago. That's just over 1% of the entire lifetime of the Earth ago. So it's just, it's small. It's a small amount of time in the grand scheme of the history of the Earth. So what more is down there for us to find? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Now,
So
I
I
do have
know.
a question about
Okay, go
giants,
ahead.
if I can, real quick. I'm sorry.
That's exactly where I was going to go. So go ahead, Victoria.
It's like we're related or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Did you know Mike and I were cousins?
No,
yeah. Distant
Yep, Mike and
cousins.
I are cousins.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Way distant.
Yeah, we discovered one day, before a show, just chatting, and to discover we have a common ancestor.
Go
Wow.
figure. Okay, what do you call them? The giants? What's the politically correct? People of large stature?
I call them beings of great stature because we're not quite sure who or what they were.
If they existed so long ago, how are they finding strands of red hair? Wouldn't that have disintegrated by that time?
Oh, okay. So I think the red hair is due to the burial process. I think that the
Okay.
way that certain chemicals interact, I think they were blonde hair or light brown hair to create that red hair. And remember, too, they added these red paints and dyes during the burials to them. So I think when we talk about like a very specific example, the Site Ka of the desert Southwest, were the red-headed cannibal giants. Well, I think we have the red hair wrong, and I think cannibal is incorrect. They were headhunters. When they fought one another, they took their heads. They went all predator on it.
It's like a trophy?
Yeah, it's like a trophy,
Okay.
and it's seen in hundreds of petroglyphs. And we have found elongated skulls that are only found in the vernal-style Fremont culture, which is, guess where? Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, McConkey Ranch, 9 Mile Canyon, Northeastern Utah, So, and then 6 fingers on the petroglyphs and pictographs. And we've been told, even considering the Bible a historical document, that they had 24 digits, 6 fingers, 6 toes.
Wow.
I think it was in 2nd Daniel where we find out about oh my gosh, I just went blank on the Rafa was
Okay.
the father. But where did he
but
come from?
Wouldn't the elongated skulls, aren't they almost ant alien shaped, if you want to call them the ant people?
Yeah, I mean, you can consider ant people. Mike and I have gotten to that discussion how I'm not when we talk about alien, I'm more of an interdimensional or ancient
Right.
civilizations and cultures, not
Mhm.
coming from outer space, because I mean, it's so vast. We've had
Well,
this
I mean,
conversation many times, but yeah,
We
I mean,
certainly have. Yeah.
and what is considered alien? That's the whole thing to consider too.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Well,
if it's something interdimensional that's already existing on our planet, and you want to throw a term on it, you could call it, instead of extraterrestrial, you call it ultra terrestrial.
Yeah.
Well, they could be here, and just they were not used to them, and their heads were shaped like an ant. So that's where the
Sure.
ant alien came from. You only can speak to your level of intelligence at that point.
Right. And I mean, you look at the Pueblo, their oral traditions about the ant people.
Yeah, our good friend Clifford Mahooty, who passed away here a couple of years ago, would talk about them regularly, and so
Right.
I was always fascinated by his stories about the ant people, and the way that they interacted with. Well, and you see some of those in the various origin stories
Right.
of that area when we talk about like the Great Deluge and that they helped the people survive. So so there's definitely something going on. And Victoria, of course, you love all that stuff, hollowed earth and places under the ground.
Well, I mean, if they look like ants and they go underground, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's an ant alien. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, on my YouTube channel, I have about 100 presentations or videos in regards to a lot of the giants, the ant people, oral traditions, the petroglyphs, pictographs, how I believe that interdimensional portals are created, through these X points, these diffusion areas. I try to go into the science. So, if you are interested in that, I try to put as much of that information as possible on the channel.
Okay, now you're talking about the portals. I had this question. I watch you all the time. I love it. I love all your videos. But some of the swirls, the little clockwise, they go clockwise, and some go counterclockwise. Is there a difference? Like one is an entry portal if it goes clockwise, and the other one's an exit portal if it goes the other direction? Or
I don't think they're all portals. I think, it's an abstract feature. So I think we have to take the entire picture into consideration. We seem to focus on just one spot of, I'll call it rock art, even though it may not, it's more of a historical record, but it's easier just to say this rock art may have 50 or 60 carvings on it, and we focus in just on the swirl. But if we pull out and look, some of those may be maps of the area. It might be talking about defending their territory. And then you get into those one-offs where you can't quite explain the anthropomorphic and the zoomorphic features that are around it, the things that are occurring. And then we have to question, what are we looking at? Is that some type of entrance or exit? Is it discussing a technology, or are we just talking about a frequency and a wavelength shift that was known to the indigenous people as music, chanting, and a mindset change?
Okay.
Yeah, I know you also want to talk about wavelength shifts. So and that's great that you mentioned the chanting. One of the fascinating things that I found from the last season of Skinwalker Ranch was when they were doing the Native American drum circle. They got the thermal cameras on the whole area, and as they were doing that chanting up there on the mesa, the area that they believe is a stone circle started glowing, started developing a heat signature. So, so how does that chanting, frequency, resonance, vibration play into all of this out there?
So I believe that we're having these electromagnetic shifts at a geomagnetic level, that something underground is interacting with energy that's available. And all energy requires to change into something else is a shift. So if we're talking about radiation, we're talking about a frequency and a wavelength. As we increase in frequency, we shorten that wavelength, it becomes stronger, more violent. It rips electrons apart. And when we have electrons that are now so charged that they can't go back to a normal element, things start to occur. NASA has been investigating for a little over a decade these X points above the planet that are electron diffusion regions, which in layman terms, it's where plasma is occurring. And when we think about the universe, 95 or 96% of the universe is plasma. It's this dark matter and this highly charged energy. But it's not interacting. There's no impact with other things. So we're missing things like the friction,
Mm-hmm.
So if this occurs in the universe and our planets are just like a micro sun where all this activity is happening, why can't the same occurrence be happening inside our planet at a micro level, creating these shifts in how energy is shaped, or how energy moves or transfers to a different to mass. Mm-hmm. And in the course of its change, what's going on? What does it make available, or what does it create?
So I have a question here out of the chat. This references, it's going back to when we were talking about the skulls. Sarah Yusuf, have you taken a look at the genetics of hydrocephaly?
Yeah, so you have to consider everything. And then you have to consider in DNA, was this, when we have these alterations, were they on purpose? Was it by design? Is it an accident caused because of a mutation? A lot of times, maybe these mutated individuals were worshipped as a deity. But if you keep the bloodlines going, what do you create? If the brother marries sister and they both have that mutation, you know, it's going to remain in that bloodline. But what is that bloodline protecting from the past?
Right.
You know, so it's a puzzle. I mean, we're lacking a lot of those puzzle pieces, unfortunately, and it drives me crazy.
It's all part of the adventure, trying
Yeah,
to unravel that mystery. Yeah. What do you think of the Paracas skulls?
They're interesting. I'd really like to see the DNA reports myself, to just kind of see, you know, what we're looking at. Are we looking at what haplogroups are we looking at? And to see if it was created instead of natural, because we have a lot of cultures that I think they were trying to simulate what they saw from their gods, and they've lost the original reason as to why they're doing it. It's just become part of the culture. So even if they've created it, what did they see originally that made them want to elongate their skulls?
Yeah.
And the Paracas skulls are interesting because there's a lot more of them available than in other locations. So you have to consider now, are we looking at an origin point? You know, did somebody come here and that's where they stopped or ended up? Or was there something already there available to them underground that brought them there as well? So was it an origin or a site to be found?
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating because you look at, okay, you know, head binding, you know, it became a ritualistic practice, but then you look at, you know, something like, you know, these skulls, the Paracas skulls and some others where, you know, the cranial capacity, I guess that's the one thing of you can't change
it, right?
But theirs is supposed to be larger. So that's interesting. Yeah, it would be fascinating to dive a little bit more, you know, a little deeper into that. You know, I am absolutely on board with you that there's, you know, history of the earth that's been lost to time. These beings of stature. You know, where is your research taking you with that? I mean, one of the times that we had you on the show, you talked about like origins of these beings of stature coming from the area of Utah on the Uintah Basin. Where's the research taking you now?
So Mexico, and eventually I think that one of those main focal or origin points for these people of great stature is ancient Armenia, which is Mount Ararat.
Yeah. Okay.
We discuss Mount Ararat even in the Bible. You know, Noah landed there. When we talk about ancient Armenia, we're talking mostly about what's current day Turkey. You know, Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Places like this. That was Armenia. What a lot of people don't realize, the Sumerians, a lot of that cuneiform was created to trade with the ancient Armenians. We have only one little piece of the puzzle, or one thing that the public is always taught, and they don't see what else goes into that around it. And Armenia was supposedly created by Haik, who was a giant that fought Baal and defeated Baal and created current day Armenia, which I think is the fourth oldest nation on the planet. And then we see this separation, like the Celtic people came from, we believe, Mount Ararat.
Right.
And we have giants in the United Kingdom. You know, we have Stonehenge, which is now only half as old as what they're finding in the Ural Mountains of Russia, which it's amazing. It's fascinating. And then we see that it looks like the Canaanites, who were also the Phoenicians, found maps that were left by these people of great stature, and they followed them and they started mining those same mines. So we're talking about Sardinia, Malta, Mexico, the desert Southwest, Utah specifically. You know, a lot of people don't realize that in the petroglyphs, there's a lot of Phoenician symbols.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta ask, how the heck did that get there?
Right. Yeah. How did Phoenician symbols get out here. Yeah, Sardinia has the giant. They call them the giant tombs. You mentioned Malta. Do you have a hypothesis on the Malta ruts, the supposed cart ruts?
Yeah, my biggest thing is I think they were seafaring. They had amazing seafaring technology that we've just, and I'm talking, I think it's hundreds of thousands of years ago, maybe even a million, 2 million years ago. And we don't know what they had or how they were able to maneuver or change or move these ships from one side to another, or was it a connecting bridge? Was the water level lower to where they were able to be connected to other islands? So I don't know. Those are really interesting. The ruts that, I mean, they're pretty wide. They go on for a long.
They go into the water.
Into the water, but
of course,
the
sea
water
levels have changed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Victoria, I've kind of been monopolizing here. You got other?
No, that's fine. I'm still stuck on lava tubes and giants.
So you're going to be
really interesting.
Yeah, are you going to be making a trip to Göbekli Tepe and in Turkey?
So I don't want to give away too much, but there's in the Ural Mountains, and unfortunately, with all the issues between Russia and Ukraine, it's really difficult to go to the Ural Mountains right now, or the Caucasus Mountains.
Yeah.
But there was a totem that was found in the Ural Mountains that is older than Göbekli Tepe, and it survived its wood because it fell into a peat bog.
Mm-hmm.
And we suddenly have this wooden totem that has symbols on it that look like some form of writing that is 12,000 years old, older than Göbekli Tepe. It makes you wonder what the hell else was made of wood that we've just, unfortunately, it didn't survive. But look, it pushed history that much further into the past.
Let's see if I can.
But that's about the time of the flood, right? 12,000 years
ago? Yes,
ago?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything's going to that 12,000 year period.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating totem. I'm going to bring this up here.
Didn't they just find someplace not too long ago?
In its original state, I think it was like 25 or 27 feet tall. It was broken into like 9 or 10 pieces. Unfortunately, several of those pieces went missing, into private collections.
Of course. Yeah.
Appropriation.
I don't know if I have the pronunciation right. The Shigur idol.
Shigur, yes.
Shigur. Okay.
Didn't they just find something in Turkey like a couple of weeks ago that was even older? Or am I dreaming that maybe? Okay, I must be dreaming that. Okay, they will. Okay, it's coming up.
They will. There you go.
Yeah.
It's coming up. No, they're going to find something. Some sort of little Stonehenge type thing. I swear I heard that. I heard that on the news.
Yeah, they're finding so much, especially like Mike said, with the LiDAR in the jungles, because it's able to see through the jungle canopy.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Amazing.
It's tall, so it's very narrow in the photo here.
Right.
But, yeah.
And there's carving on the front and the back. And the back's really interesting because it looks like ancient Akkadian or Phoenician. So, whether it's a different culture, because you're talking about an 8 to 10,000 year difference between the cultures. So we say, language didn't start until this period, but no, you're wrong. So
and that's what I'm finding fascinating about Guten Pinag. I can never pronounce it properly. But the geologists there are saying, well, this was constructed by humans in Indonesia, about 25,000 years ago. And the archaeologists are saying, well, but we, the people in Indonesia weren't building things like that, even as far back as like 11,000 years ago. It's like, you're talking about 14,000 year difference.
Right. Yeah.
People and technology change, could be completely different culture and even different people that had built the thing.
Yeah. And that's the issue, is they don't want to change anything, because this is where how they get paid. They make their money off of grant funding. It's how they get funded. And unfortunately, I always tell people, what their professor was taught is what they taught their students, which are now the professors, which are teaching the new students the same thing.
Right.
But wouldn't it be better to have the truth than just perpetuating the narrative?
Well, you would think, right?
Sometimes.
But like James said, a lot of them are afraid of losing their livelihood. If they buck the trend, then they lose their grant money. They no longer have a job. The ones that get me are, people, some of these people have been, interviewed and talked to about this. And they'll say, well, this has been what I've been teaching for the last 40 years. Why am I going to basically say that what I've been talking about my entire career is hogwash?
Yeah.
They don't want to do that. Or the ones that, I wrote all these books on it. Okay, write another book.
Right.
That's where the whoopsie comes in.
It's kind of a shame because, these people in their youth, they were excited for this. They wanted to find those mysteries. Some of them may have, even seen themselves as like a type of Indiana Jones type character. And somewhere along the way that changed, where instead of trying to discover the new things, they were trying to hold on to and save what their previous work had been. So it's a shame. I hope that doesn't ever happen to us.
Look, in the past, witchcraft was really science being, used, and people didn't know or understand.
Yeah.
Well, so is astrology. I mean, that was
astrology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Now, have you found any, speaking of astrology, the stars, have you found some significant astronomical alignments there around the Uintah Basin?
So I'm out of I'm so bad with astronomy. I don't even try. That's my weak point. I don't even try to do
it. Fair enough.
This is why I need to be with you this summer.
She's still pining for that.
I got a remote job, James. Come on.
Archaeoastronomy. That's
that would be
out of my wheelhouse.
Cool.
So we have just
new science. Yeah.
So we have just a couple minutes left here until we kick over to the after show, which is members only. James, for our public audience, do you want to point them in the direction, your books, website, work you have coming up, events you might be doing? What do you have on tap?
Yeah. So April 20th, I'm in the Phoenix area at Scottsdale. Jimmy Church is putting on a conference April the 20th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Scottsdale. Tickets just went on sale for that yesterday. I will be presenting there. So will Nick Pope. He'll also be there. So that should be pretty fun. On YouTube, if you go to James Keenan, Giant and Paranormal, no spaces. Like I said, I have about 90 videos and presentations on ancient civilizations, cultures, high strangeness, Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, Mexico, Armenia, the Zuni Pueblo, you name it. If I think it has something to do with the lost culture, civilization, or giants, it's there. And I always tell people, an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So some things I may have put 3 or 4 years ago, I may have come to a different conclusion or found new research or evidence that has changed that. So take that into consideration when you're looking at how those presentations, what the dates are. Because I'm the first one to say, hey, I'm wrong, or I've changed my mind. I think this is a better outcome or conclusion, or we have found evidence to be able to substantiate that this is what occurred.
Yeah. No, I do the same thing. At the like in the introduction of my books, I'll say I reserve the right to change my mind, which I think is prudent, because as you discover new things, well, that might change, other evidence that you had found, other conclusions that you had made. So yeah, that's completely prudent to do. So appreciate that with you, James. So
thanks, Mike.
Yeah. All right. So that is going to conclude our public side of this evening. Those that are members of the Connected Universe portal, please stay on and hang out there. on the Connected Universe portal. For those that are listening to the podcast version of this later, again, please join us live every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. James, again, thank you very much,
Thanks,
my
everybody.
friend. And you hang on too. Till next time, time really exists.